So, I've been doing a lot of research this morning, and I kind of want to talk about some of our political history and how it appears to be repeating itself. But in order to enlighten how it's repeating itself, I'm going to have to go over some facts in our history first. And so, I think I'm going to start off with Robert F. Kennedy. He was a U.S. Senator and he was a presidential candidate. Okay. I have a lot of this pulled up on my computer. I've been writing stuff down, so you're not going to see me look directly at the phone. I'm sorry about that. But I've been putting a lot of data together this morning, and I just kind of want to share it with the world. So, Robert, he was a political figure, and he championed civil rights and the fight against poverty. He was a strong advocate for the rights of the poor minorities, and he was working to address suffering and inequality. In order to succeed in this, he focused highly on improving the condition for the working class Americans, particularly blue-collar workers, and he sought to strengthen unions. He was also a vocal critic of the Vietnam War, advocating for an end to the conflict, and that may have potentially saved many lives by stopping the war. In 1968, he was shot and killed by Saran after giving his victory speech in the California Democratic primary. Saran's motive: he was a Jordanian Palestinian who was reportedly motivated by Kennedy's support for Israel. The assassination occurred after Kennedy's impassioned victory speech, underscoring the connection between his political expression and the violence directed at him. This ended up being profoundly detrimental to America, and it marked a significant turning point in political disillusionment and loss of hope for national reconciliation after consecutive assassinations in a violent year. The public ended up retreating from the political sphere, so this contributed to a long-term drop in voter turnout and created a lasting sense of potential path to a lasting change in areas like poverty and working conditions and foreign policy. A lot of people didn't want to vote the first few years after RFK passed, after he was assassinated. It had a really detrimental effect on our society, and that's not even the first one. Next, we have Martin Luther King Jr., who was assassinated April 4th of 1968. He was a prominent civil rights leader and a Nobel Peace Prize laureate. He was assassinated by a sniper while standing at the balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee. He was a central figure in the civil rights movement, and his leadership, philosophy, and nonviolent resistance and powerful oratory fundamentally transformed the United States. His death was a devastating loss that caused a widespread grief, violence, and crisis of hope, which profoundly altered the course of movement and the nation. His influence extended far beyond his lifetime, shaping the nation's legal landscape, and inspired so many social movements and challenging the conscience of America. His activism and his protests were extremely important in the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. These laws completely dismantled legal segregation and eliminated discriminatory voting practices. It allowed everyone to be able to vote, no matter what your color was. As long as you were a citizen of the United States, didn't matter if you were white or black. You got to vote after that. That was huge. And by spearheading voter registration drives, he empowered African Americans to participate in the democratic process, which shifted political dynamics in the South and increased black political representation. That's huge. He also focused to address economic inequality and poverty affecting Americans of all races. His Poor People's Campaign, which he organized at the time of his death, brought national attention to the need for economic justice. Martin Luther King Jr. did a lot of public speaking on what he believed was right and what he fought for. He utilized his freedom of speech to help all Americans, no matter their race, but to help them and to help drive for a better life, to help reduce poverty, to help the blue collars and the working class have better opportunities. He fought for a dream, and he was assassinated for that. Now let's move on to Abraham Lincoln. Now, if you all remember, he was assassinated in 1865 by John Wilkes Booth while he was attending a play at Ford's Theater. Prior to his death, he had given a speech that expressed support for granting voting rights to former slaves. Now, John Wilkes Booth, he was a Confederate sympathizer, and he was reportedly enraged and vowed to kill him. He did not agree with Abraham Lincoln's beliefs. And quite frankly, it's still not a right to kill or assassinate anyone over it. But he, again, was assassinated over expressing his freedom of speech and for fighting for what was right. There was no need for those slaves to not have voting rights. But Booth, he did not agree. The aftermath of this had a profound impact on the nation, and sadly enough, it was already in a volatile post-Civil War period. So it highlighted the deep divisions and political animosity that surrounded the issues of slavery and civil rights. So again, another person trying to help make the country better, support its U.S. citizens, and to help create a better life, and spoke loudly and proud about it, was assassinated for his freedom of speech. So as you can see, all three of these assassinations, somebody was fighting to do what was right for their country. Somebody was fighting for the American people, and somebody was using their freedom of speech to speak about it. They tried to make sure that they were safe rallies, but yet assassinated. And then you have Charlie Kirk, September 10th of 2025 at a university in Utah. Publicly speaking at a debate specifically for freedom of speech, when he was assassinated by a sniper. Charlie, in my opinion, Charlie really worked hard to help provide knowledge and open debates to the young people in our nation. Because he, as many others, knew that it's this younger generation that is going to lead the world someday. We want to lead them to great things, greatness, support and empathy for the American people. He also he had so much faith in his heart and such a love for God, and he tried to spread that around America too. He tried to help people understand right from wrong. He fought for what was right in our country. He also fought for the American people. He supported Trump. He was very open and proud about his beliefs, but he was also respectful in every debate, every single one. And even if he didn't disagree, or even if he didn't agree with the people that he was debating with, and folks in the crowds were booing these people, he would ask the crowds to be quiet and let his opposition speak. Because even though he didn't agree, he still had a common respect and knowledge of the fact that you can agree to disagree and not hate the person standing beside you. He did not hate the LGBTQ communities. He did want to help provide them a better life by giving them all the knowledge possible and giving them facts. But he never hated any of them. He never hated anyone. He utilized his freedom of speech, and he was also assassinated for it. So many people in United States history, including way more than the ones that I just listed off, were assassinated for fighting for what they believed was right. And so with that, this happening again in 2025, it really does just show how much history is repeating itself. There have been so many times in history where this country has become divided and volatile and violent. And it's happening again now. And it's been in the making for a while. It really has. It's just been increasing. It shouldn't matter if you're Democrat, Republican, liberal, or conservative. You should be able to sit in the same room and at least have some sort of form of respect for each other, to not want to shoot somebody down because you don't agree with them. There have even been so many young people on Facebook, under the age of 20 years old, under the age of 18, some of them even under the age of 15, that are making videos about how wrong this is and how the world needs more love. And you know what? These kids are right. And in each time that these assassinations happened, that was exactly what the world needed. It needed more love. It needed more hope. It needed more grace and more courage to fight for what's right, to understand that it's okay to agree to disagree, that it's okay to have a neighbor that might be in a different political category than you, and still support thy neighbor and love thy neighbor. I think people need to come closer to God. I think that, you know what? Let me just tell you a story, because I think this story is going to explain it better than anything else. There are times that there are feelings that I have that I didn't understand. I didn't understand why I had them. I didn't understand why it felt like there was something so heavy on my heart. I just didn't get it. But that was because I didn't realize how much God had a hand to play in that. I really didn't understand. But I do know. And it was quite the time when I learned it. The foundation of every marriage, which a lot of times is why they happen in a church or there's a pastor, the foundation of that marriage is God. God bestows his love upon you, and he helps bond that formation. But he's there. And then it's the two of you that merge your hearts into one. And you live with each other for the rest of time. And you love each other for the rest of time. And you have God as the base of that foundation, and then it's the two of you. And I didn't really understand how impactful that was until recently. In July, we went to Glencoe, Minnesota, because one of my husband's uncles passed away. Now, I did not know this man. I don't think I met him. I might have met him at my husband's dad's funeral, but honestly, it was such a stressful day with everything going on that, please don't take it personal if any of my husband's family watches this, but I honestly did not remember meeting a lot of you at Lee's dad's funeral. So I really didn't have an emotional connection when we went to that funeral, but I went with my husband because I wanted to support him, and I didn't want him to feel alone. I wanted him to know that, I love him and I'm there for everything. And while we were sitting in the church, and while we were listening to the sermon and the funeral, I felt this weight on my heart. I felt this weight on my chest, like I had no control over it. I felt such grief and such sadness, and I didn't know why. Then I looked over at my husband and I saw the tears streaming down his face. And that was the moment that I realized that it wasn't my own grief I was feeling. I was feeling his. I was feeling his pain, his suffering, his grief over losing someone that he loved so dearly. We were sitting in a Lutheran church in Glencoe, Minnesota, when I realized how strong God was in our relationship, and how strong mine and my husband's love truly is. When we hit those moments where I can truly feel his pain, But there would have been a point in time in my life where I don't think I would have been strong enough to handle that. But when my husband had his heart attacks back in 2020, that's really when I accepted God back into my life. Because I'll tell you what, when my husband had those heart attacks, I was told he wasn't supposed to live. I called God everything that should have had me damned to hell. And now 5 years later, my husband is still with me here today. And he's helping me raise our beautiful children. And he's doing all right. So, with the way that history is repeating itself, and with all the violence and volatile actions that are going on in America right now, I think it's best that we find a way to let God back into our hearts. And in all reality, He's always been there. I mean, there's a reason you have a conscience. It's kind of like the little angel sitting on your shoulder. But when you don't follow those instincts, when God's trying to tell you, hey, you need to follow this path, and you ignore that, you stray farther away from Him. And I think if we're going to get this country back on track, if we're going to try and make things right again and stop all this violence, then I think we need to let Him back into our hearts and into our country and into our souls and quit blocking Him out. We need to find peace. We need love. We need respect for one another. There's so much hatred in the world, so much evil that goes far beyond assassinations of political views. All of these shootings at the schools, so many in just the last few months. Attempted threats, kids bringing guns in their backpacks, putting them in their lockers with an intent to kill during certain events. So many things are so wrong. If this isn't a better time, I don't know what is. But you know what, folks? If you ain't read the Bible in a while, maybe it's time you pick it up. Maybe it's time to start seeing things in a different view and a better perspective. Because we have to make a change. The world is broken, but there is a way to fix it. The question is will anyone take the time to do it? How many people will follow in the right paths and open their hearts up to a greater power? God wants us to have good lives, you know. He wants us to follow our dreams. He wants us to have wealth, but not in ways of money, in ways of love and gratitude. There were significant changes in our lives here after my husband's heart attacks and after I let God back in. And I realized that He's really there and He actually does listen. I've never prayed more. I've prayed more in the last 5 years than I think I ever did in my whole entire life. And I pray for so much. I pray for the families of the victims of children at school shootings. I have prayed for Charlie's family. I have prayed for his assassin's family. I have prayed for people in communities and homeless and veterans, my children, myself. Guidance when the weather's bad and I have no choice but to drive through it. For as many things as I can think of. Sometimes I might sound a little selfish when I'm praying for things here. But then I started even more after I started homesteading, and I'm still not the greatest at it. It's still a work in progress. There are areas where I should have been so much more determined and devout to an area than what I was. There have been some failures in my homesteading that were purely of my own demise, but a learning progress all the same. But all I've done in these last 5 years is find ways to grow closer to Him. And it's made things so much better in life. It's created so much peace and happiness and strength that I didn't know I needed. And the sole supporter of all of the struggles my husband and I have went through and came out even stronger for. And thanks for God being at the forefront of our foundation, He also gave us the strength to persevere. As a couple, as our hearts entangled in one. We need to find a way to stop letting history repeat itself. We need to find a way to come together again. I don't know how yet. I don't know how it's all supposed to work. But one thing I'm confident on is letting God into our hearts again is the very first step.